Hey guys, welcome to another Bob Ross in the Art of Guitar video. In this week's video, what I'm going to discuss is the top 5 guitarists that have had the biggest influence on me as a guitar player and as a musician. And this list is in no particular order. Before we start though, I just want to remind you to check the links below. I do have online video lessons on musiclessons.com, and I do have a Patreon site if you're interested in giving some support. Now, let's get to the list. So the very first guitar player on my list would have to be Jimmy Bruno. Now when I first started getting into jazz, I was really trying to find some guitar players that inspired me to play, and most of the guitar players that I'd heard at the time didn't really interest me at all. And it wasn't because they weren't great players, because they actually were. And just to give you an example, some of the guys that I was hearing was Joe Pass and Herb Ellis and Tal Farlow, and it wasn't that I didn't respect it, it's just coming from more of the shred guitar background, I was trying to relate to something a little bit different. So initially I was drawn more towards saxophone players as opposed to guitar players, but I can't remember how I heard the name Jimmy Bruno, but somehow I managed to find some things on him, and then I think I got on Amazon and ordered a couple of his albums out, or maybe I went to one of the CD stores at the time, which, as most of you guys know now, it's not easy to come across too many of these CD stores anymore. There's some smaller shops that are open, but regardless, I can't remember how I got the CD, but I remember I ordered the CD Burnin'. And it was around that time, I believe we were in our improv class, we were starting to take a look at giant steps. And I remember turning on the track of Jimmy playing giant steps, and I heard him playing, harmonizing the melody with the chords in the beginning. And then all of a sudden the tempo took off, and just his ability to navigate through all of that. And he wasn't playing it in the way that Coltrane did, with the digital patterns. It was really something to take a listen to what he was able to do. And then I went on to order out some more of his CDs. Trying to remember what, the ones that stand out to me would be the one with him and Joe Beck. That's a killer one. The musical interplay between those two is just spectacular. I really enjoyed listening to that album. It was a little bit different than what I was listening to on Burning, but to me that was just amazing to hear the interaction between those two guitar players. And then the other one that stands out is the one with him and Howard Alden. So I went on to explore more of his work. And also, it got to the point to where, I was transcribing some of his stuff, and not a lot. I think there was one, Maplewood Avenue was another one. Yeah, with a trio, Tony Michelli doing vibes. I can't remember the bass player, but I remember listening to that too and just thinking, man, this is great. I really enjoy it. And then he opened up his, it was when he was paired with Artist Works, and he had the online lessons, and I was starting to, get more interested to the point to where, I enrolled and started to do some interaction with him on there. And then because of that, I found that he was on the faculty list for UArts, and then went on to study at UArts. I never did study with him when I was at UArts. But here's a coincidence. Here's something that to me is a coincidence. When I went to do my audition for UArts, I went to Chris's Cafe, this is in Philly in case you didn't know. I went to Chris's Cafe, and after the fact, like when I actually got up there, I'd performed there, and about a year ago I went back to perform there. But when I went to perform, do my audition, that night he was playing, or the night after, he was playing at Chris's Cafe, and I went to watch him, and it felt like everything was lining up, coincidence. whatever you want to call it, however you want to see it. But I would say Jimmy has been a huge influence early on in my development. All right, the second guitar player that had a big influence on me is Jonathan Kreisberg. Now, I've never seen Jonathan Kreisberg live. When I was leaving out of, another coincidence maybe, when I was leaving out of Philly, the day after I graduated, and I had my family there, my wife's family was there, we had to leave out. He was there the next night, and I was like, oh man, if I could just stay one more night. But it just, that's not the way it worked out, so I wasn't able to see him. But I remember I had found some of his stuff on iTunes, and it was trioing. And, I'd been so used to hearing different versions of Countdown, and that's the first track on trioing. And I turned it on, and I was like, man, this is something totally different than what I was used to hearing before. I was really immersed. Up until grad school, I was starting to get really immersed into more of the traditional style of playing. And when I put that on, I was walking in the streets of Philly, turned it on, and I thought, let's give it a shot, let's see what it's like. And I'm listening to him like, man, this is different. This is a trio setting, and he's comping for himself. He's playing and it's like small versions of these chords. It's like using like shell voicings or just thirds and sevenths in general, maybe omitting the root. And I thought, man, that is killer, man. The space that he had, the motivic development, his tone was definitely a huge impact on me. When I heard his tone, I was like, I gotta have that. That sound is just amazing. And sorry again, but hearing all of that together, the fact that it was a trio, the way he was interpreting standards, and the way that motivically things were being developed, comping for himself, everything was dead on to me. And he's one of the players. There hasn't been... I've done transcribing, and I don't do transcribing so much anymore, but I did for a time period. I really was immersed into what he was doing, and I started picking up a lot of his works, his albums. And right after grad school, I had the one, what's it called, 9 Stories. I'm blanking on the name, and I'm so sorry for that. But it's the one that has Summertime on it, and it's in 5. And if any of you guys are following my channel or you follow me on any other platform, I will do Summertime in 5. And it's, I relate it back to him. I give him the credit for opening that idea up to me. I thought, man, that's pretty cool. Let me see if I can, pull that off and do it in 5. So Kreisberg's tone, just the way he handles tunes, his interpretations has been a huge impact on me. The third guitarist that has affected me in a way that maybe the others have not so much is John Abercrombie. And the reason being is his approach and how he would approach playing tunes. And it really came, for me, I think, if I remember correctly, the first times I was really listening to him was his playing on Jerry Bergonzi's album, Tenorist. And I remember listening to how he was playing and thinking, that's something different. He's not playing a lot of lines, like really quick lines. His is definitely a very melodic approach to playing. And he also done something similar that I was mentioning as far as like with Kreisberg, is that I would hear him comp for himself, and I was listening to his voicings underneath when Bergonzi would play, and that was just something totally different to me. His tone, and then once I found out that he was fingerstyle and not using a pick, I mean, that had, some more implications. That was very interesting to me. Now, from time to time, I will let the pick go and just go fingerstyle just to explore and try to figure out what I can do, because that's a whole nother realm right there. You get used to a certain habitual thing, you take that away, and then it's going to shape maybe how you are able to play or interpret ideas in your head, put those on your instrument. So when I take that a step further, I think the next thing I was checking out with him was it Timeless? It's one of those earlier ones. I really wasn't into it so much, and then I heard the things he put out, the Gateway albums, and I thought that was really cool. I was really into that. That was some inspiring playing to me as well. But the big takeaway for me is I caught some of his instructional video where I think the guy's name is John Basil. I could be saying his name wrong or not getting the last name right, but it's where him and another guitar player, they're at his house and he's playing and he's talking about the different ways to go about improvising and how he went the fusion route and then he came back into trying to play through standards again, and the way that he approached it, where he would take the single string idea, which I know he had said he got that from, I think it was Jim Hall, I think Mick Goodrick talked about it as well, but listening to him discuss that, I never heard that idea before, and then him talking about using a particular rhythmic pattern through a tune, doing like a bass line type thing, but not actually being a bass player, but just walking, quarter notes through a tune or using half notes. That opened up a whole other way for me to see opportunities and how to develop improvisationally, in my playing, the improvisational aspect of my playing. And then later on, of course, I got more into the other stuff that he put out, and I actually went back and saw where he was using a pick in the past, and I mean, he's always been an exceptional player, and I think that his use of space, his phrasing as he continued on, his compositions are really amazing to me as well too. So Abercrombie was definitely a huge influence for me. Alright, so number 4 on my list is Peter Bernstein, or some of you may say Peter Bernstein. To me, I think it's Peter Bernstein, if I remember correctly. But Peter's playing is another one that right after I got out of grad school, I was listening to Kreisberg, and then I came across some of the stuff that Eric Alexander, tenor sax player, had put out. And I noticed that there was a guitar player on there, and it was Peter. He was on those. On not all of them, but, he made appearances on some. And I thought, man, his playing's a little bit different. There's some space there. There's some intervals in his playing. It's something that also stands out as a bit different to me. So I went down that rabbit hole, went on iTunes, started checking out everything that he was putting out. And man, I tell you what, when you start doing that kind of stuff, you got to be careful, because you get on iTunes, you start listening to something, you're like, bye. And I there for a while, I think, at least twice a week I would get an album of his, and his is one that I actually transcribed. And some of his songs, I really went to the effort of trying to get into his playing to see what it was that stood out to me. And he was one of those players that, similar to Abercrombie, I wasn't hearing a lot of technical things happen because it was a lot of phrasing. And then all of a sudden, he would pull out some of that. And I'm like, oh, so he can do that, I wasn't sure, I was thinking, well, maybe he's playing like that because maybe the technique's not there. And I was like, no, he can do it too. It's just, that's not his style. And, he's creating some melodic things here. He's developing something, You know, he's not feeling the pressure of having to just all of a sudden, you know, do a flurry of notes. And what I really dug was what he did with the trio with Bill Stewart and Larry Goldings. Yes, so some of that stuff they done. I can't remember which one it is where they done Woodstock. And I thought, you know, and that's the I can't remember the singer-songwriter who done that. Joni Mitchell. It's Joni Mitchell. If I remember correctly, that's a Joni Mitchell tune. Maybe not. If you want to leave a comment below, correct me on that. But I'm pretty sure it's Joni Mitchell too. But the stuff on those trios where you have the organ, guitar, and the drum, you know, because you hear about the Jimmy Smith stuff, and you know, that's one I heard a lot about, and to hear then the Larry Goldings, Peter Bernstein with Bill Stewart on the drums, that was just a different, you know, type of vibe, a different atmospheric thing that was taking place to me. So, you know, that was something that I thought, man, his playing, I got to figure it out. And then the solo album of his came out, you know, where he's doing solo guitar, and I was like, man, what is that? You know, so, you know, he like I said, he's one that I took some time and I really worked on transcribing, and I mean, I would sit down with his solo and go all the way through, and the other one where it's trio and him playing the Monk tunes. That's killer too. So if you haven't checked those out, which if you're a jazz guitar fan, I'm sure that you have. But yeah, Peter's a great guy. And also, Peter even took the time when I put out my first album to give me a quote to use, you know, for promotional purposes. So very thankful for that. All right, guys. So here it is, number 5. Like I said, this list has not arranged in a particular order, not one being more influential than the other, one being any better to me than the other. Here it is, Ben Monder. This is another one. When I was in Philly, grad school, and I think, I'm really trying to remember what album it was that I got. I think it was Flux, was the very first one I got, and the other one that stood out to me at the time was not one of his, but it was a sax player named Andy Parsons. And if I remember correctly, the name of the album is it's called Flip. I believe it's called Flip. It has an exclamation mark in the front and upside down one in the back. It says Flip. I'm pretty sure that's the one I'm thinking of. And I was hearing his playing on that and Flux, and I was like, I thought this is jazz, you know, and we, you know, I think that we all have this conception of what jazz is, a label for what it is for us, and the way other people interpret it. But when I heard that, and then when he would do like these distorted things, these big chords, you know, a lot of atmospheric type stuff, I was like, no way, I don't know what this is. This can't be any jazz stuff, you know. I'm not hearing any of that bebop influence stuff on this, nah. But the more I listened to it, you know, it opened up my mind more and more. And what really inspired me, I think, is it's a mixture of listening to those albums a lot. You know, there was a few others I started to pick up too, but listen to those 2 that I mentioned. And then I got one with him and Donnie McCaslin. And I went and seen them at Chris's Cafe. Donnie McCaslin was there, and Ben Monder was on that. And I'm blanking on who else was part of that lineup because I was so focused on Donnie McCaslin and Ben Monder. And his playing, the chord voicings he was using, and I was watching, you know, and I picked up, you know, his first book that has his compositions, and I was like, this hurts my hand trying to play this stuff, you know. I'm trying to get this stuff and I can't get it. You know, this is too hard. I don't know. I don't think I'm into this. But the more I, you know, explored his music, the more and more I listened to it. The fact that there's rock elements in there, which coming from that rock background means a lot to me, you know, I could relate. So Ben Monders is, you know, for his creativity, the fact that he has, I know that he can play through standard tunes. I've heard the recordings of it. I've got a lot of his stuff. But his way of going through it, his way of developing ideas, you know, going outside of I guess what you would consider the norm, you know, what people consider, you know, that's kind of a blanket statement. The conception of what jazz is and what the jazz language is, I mean, he's pushed that into, you know, developing his own voice. And that has meant a lot to me to hear someone that has been on so many people's albums, putting out his own work, to have the kind of influence that he's had, that means a lot. And so for that, you know, Ben Monder is definitely right there in the top 5 for me as well. Alright guys, I want to thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share this. Don't forget the links below. And stay tuned for another video in the Bob Ross and the Art of Guitar series.